Wheaton behind the wheel. If you pulled up to the studio right now, the first thing you'd see when you drive in is the Highwallers car. It's sitting there ready to go. Gary and I did some work on it the other night. We got to put a new fuel pump on. I believe that's the problem. So once we get that done, that will be one of our track packers.
Was that on Instagram that you said barn find?
Yeah.
So if you go on Gary Griff's Instagram, there's a picture of it. He says barn find. He actually did pull it out of the barn.
Of dust and cobwebs galore.
And probably a little chicken poop. Yeah. It did come out of the barn. And
Gary did an amazing job cleaning this thing up.
That's what I was going to say.
It looks new almost.
That's great.
The plans for that car is it will be restored back to how it looked identically in 1987. We've got some work ahead of us, but it can be done and it will be done. So that'll be what we're packing the track with. It's going to be a neat for the fans that have Northwest Racing history that have seen a lot of it. They'll remember this car. I know that the first time Gary had come over to the studio and I walked him out to the barn. I'm not kidding you when I say it was in the barn under a tarp covered in dust. I pulled the tarp back and Gary's eyes just got big and he said, "Where did you get that? I remember watching that car race in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I said, I gave him the history on the project and what has transpired there and how I ended up with the car. Gary just, again, watching his eyes getting distended, he's like, man, I remember watching this car on the asphalt at Eugene when Kenny Wheaton were in it, asphalt and dirt. That's what these guys did back then. It was fun to watch that. We had a great conversation, and we drug it out. Gary and Dave and I.
This is the first time I've seen it in daylight.
It's sharp.
When we drug it out.
He did an amazing job cleaning it up.
It looks as good as any of the cars. Well, not any of them, but a lot of the cars. It looks better than a lot of the cars that we see running.
That are currently running.
It does.
Yes.
Currently, yeah.
It'll look better than 90% of the cars on the track today once the car is done how it's supposed to be done.
And its history doesn't stop there because it'll still be on a racetrack.
That's right.
It looks like I'm at the beginning of the season, not the end.
Right. Yeah.
Clarify that.
So, good times. We've got boy, the chat line is busy tonight. Boy, there's so much to talk about.
Where do you start?
Start with Southern Oregon Speedway.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Well, we were off last Saturday.
Yes.
Because of
predicted
weather. I don't know if that ever came about, but it was a good call simply because a lot of people drive from out of town, and nobody wants to drive for 3.5, 4, 5 hours and then have to turn around and come home.
And I'm glad
we appreciate Mike McCann for that.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. We, as a group, being where we are located in the state of Oregon, it's a 3.5, 4 hour drive for us to get to the track. And I'm glad you brought this up because during the week, if you watch Facebook, the negativity, Facebook can be such a great tool for promoting for the positivity of the sport. There are so many people out there that jump on when they see the post on Moxie or they see the post on Southern Oregon Speedway about the races being canceled because of incoming inclement weather, the threat of lightning, the threat of the thunderstorms that was coming, the rain they got. People don't understand, and I'm not talking about the racers. And there was some racers that were that probably should listen to this because it's not just about the Southern Oregon track or any other track. It's about the big picture. Let's say it rains like hell the night before, okay? You've got a threat of an incoming thunderstorm, and let's say Mike doesn't cancel. Now what happens? You got guys who come into a sprint car show that are towing in from Central California, possibly from Washington, all over Oregon. They drive 4 or 5 hours, like Sandy says. They get there. The pits are soaked. Trucks are sinking, and then it rains again. What do? It's not just about the track.
Home.
Right.
I mean,
if you can get out of the pit area.
Right.
Because that's what people don't realize. People don't realize that it's not just about the track surface. It's about the whole facility.
Well, and I don't mind, and I know as a group, we don't mind driving down there. If we drove down there and had to turn around and come back home,
it is what it is.
It's no
that's
skin
what happens.
for us.
But I tell
when
you
you're
what,
towing,
yes.
But let me tell you, the courtesy that Mike McCann put out there and the fact that he gave these guys a head up, hey, listen, I'm going to give you guys enough time to find somewhere else to race because If you tow here, the chances are it was a 50% chance of rain. In the state of Oregon, anything over 30, it's going to rain. We know this. We live here. It's just the way it is. So for Mike McCann to have enough consideration to say, hey, listen, guys, there's a big threat coming in. I don't think we're going to get the show in. I don't want to take the risk. I'd rather have you go race somewhere else and have a good time than to tow all the way here to get rained out and have to go all the way back with nothing. Okay, how many promoters do you know would do that? I'll tell you right now.
As a matter of fact, there's the opposite can happen.
Most guys, 99% of the promoters I know, and I'm not talking bad about anybody, I'm talking facts. This is what I've seen. They wait till noon on race day. Now you got guys that have towed in for 4 hours away in California or whatever. They're there at the track wanting to get in. Gates aren't open yet. Guess what? Sorry, come back next week. We're raining out. Rain just hit.
What are most track policies for rain out? Is it after heat races?
If they get the heat races in, yeah.
I think it's individual, though, isn't it? Is there a standard out there?
Most of the time, it's the heat races. If you get into the heat races, it's considered a show. Fans don't get rain tickets. You don't get paid. Whatever, all that good stuff.
It's just not good all the way around. It's
better
not. Just to suck it up and stay home and hang out with your family.
Give those guys a play. Say, hey, listen, guys, we're not going to make the show. Go somewhere else and race. At least they get to go somewhere else and race.
All the other racetracks in Oregon were open, by the way. Everybody else raced. So they had that option.
They had that option, right. And the guys coming up from California didn't have to tow all the way into the state of Oregon for a show and turn around and go home with no place to race and empty-handed. Okay, I'll tell you right now, as someone who's in the sport for a long time, who has always, as much as I love racing and as much as I love being in a car or a cart or anything that goes fast, I have always, since I was a little kid, paid attention to the promotional side, the business side of the sport, from the announcer all the way through the track owners that I have worked with and how they do things. And I'll tell you right now, you can learn a lot from every single person in that capacity. I spent a lot of years around Claire Arnold. I don't know if you're going to find anybody that did it better. Claire understood. Claire was on the western side of the United States what Earl Baltz at Eldora was to all of dirt track racing. Claire was the racer's promoter. I think the best I've seen in that capacity since has been Mike McCann. Mike McCann does a great job. He's old school. Now, Mike is old school. There's some things about people, things about Mike some people don't like. But Mike is set in his ways. He's been in this game a long time. I'll tell you right now.
He's been to every track except for one.
Mike knows how to promote. Mike knows how to run a racetrack. And Mike does a good job. Look what he's doing at Southern Oregon. Look what was that. Look at the state of that racetrack for the last 10 years and where it's been going downhill quick. Okay? Mike has done a pretty good job turning that place around given the mess that he got into. That right there is a testimony to what he knows about this sport. Does a great job. In the short time that I've worked with Mike McCann at Southern Oregon Speedway, I've learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from Claire Arnold. And I'll tell you right now, I learned a lot from Jerry Schramm. There's good things about every promoter. There's bad things about every promoter. But if you take those good things and you put them all in one package, a guy can do a lot of good things for the sport.
Well, it's just like any relationship, right?
Yep.
You take the good and leave the bad behind. You
can learn from that bad too.
Well, yeah.
You can learn from that. I mean,
you learn
as
from
much as you can learn what to do, you can also learn what not to do.
Yes.
Okay? That's a two-way street. You got to pay attention to the big picture. I've seen some guys do some messed up things as promoters. And I've seen those same promoters do some really, really good things. It's like life. Sometimes you have to fail to learn. Sometimes you have to make things. You have to try new things. And every promoter's done it. Every promoter has done it. It's part of making things better. How do you learn if you don't fail? Let me ask you that. How do you learn if you don't make a mistake?
You don't, because you don't learn through. If your life is everything's going great, you won't learn anything.
Right.
You only learn through mistakes. Period. That's just the way it is.
Well, and you can learn from watching those mistakes.
You sure can.
Okay, and I've done a lot of that in my life. And I've made a lot of mistakes. Now, don't get me wrong. I've made my fair.
I think we had this conversation here just in the last day or two with the the new tracks racing surface. Wherever you start in life, you're going to start at the bottom. Whether you're building a racetrack or whether you're starting a new job or whatever, you start at the bottom. You learn through your mistakes, and we're going to have an awesome racetrack. But we already have found out a few things that we shouldn't do to that surface.
That particular surface is very touchy.
And we're learning as we go. But
Dave and Dawn and myself spent 13 hours out there this last week, one day. We were there for 13 hours putting that surface together. When that surface was put together, it was the most phenomenal thing I've ever seen on a racetrack. Gary, you saw it. Sandy, you saw it. It looked like you guys have seen the pictures on Facebook, those that follow me. It looked like a glass tabletop. Smoothest dang thing I've ever seen on a racetrack. And it was absolutely amazing. Here's the part. The track, when we put that clay down, that clay was very, very moist. And this clay that we've got here is like something I've never seen. It is the stickiest, gooeyest. It's going to be the most hooked up stuff when it's wet and tacky. But let me tell you guys something. You better be prepared when this stuff dries out. Because I'm telling you, it's going to be old school dirt track racing. It's going to be slick and it's going to be smooth. That being said, I'm looking at the track and the moisture, and I'm starting to see a few spots dip a little bit because it's so soft. Dave and I make the call. I said, I want to get the ripper out. He hooks up to the tractor. I pull out. I rip it. Okay? We let it sit for a while. Dave comes out, rips it again. Okay? And I'm kind of looking at the track going, wow, this track's doing some weird stuff. It started drying out really fast.
Real fast.
We opened it up. It started drying out real fast. So Dave, here's what we caught was in the last 3 loads that came in, 2 of them kind of had some rock in it. There was some rock and we didn't catch in these 2 loads, or I would have sent them back. Every load that came in today, I literally crawled up into the top of the dump truck.
Before they dumped it out, he crawled into the dump truck.
And when I crawled up onto the top of the dump trucks, went into the bed and inspected this clay because it was not getting dumped if it wasn't good. I'm telling you, after what we just went through, it wasn't getting dumped. So Dave gets the rake out, puts the screen on the track, drags it behind the tractor for half hour, okay? Because when we started seeing the surface open up, these rocks started coming up. So Dave and I made the call to put the screen on. He drags it for probably a half hour, and we brought all these rocks to the surface. Now I've got these rocks on the surface that we're trying to get rid of. Here's how, I'm not kidding you. These are little rocks, okay? There's some big ones. There's little ones. I actually have a friend coming in with a street sweeper to clean the surface of a dirt track. That's where we're at.
With the street sweeper.
Yeah.
Okay? There's just certain things you have to do it right, and I think that's about the only way we're going to get this done.
We tried rakes, tried brooms, tried blowers.
Yes.
It didn't. It worked, but it was taking forever.
Yeah.
We would still be out there with those tools doing it. Once we get that top, we've seen it. We've gone through. We've inspected this track so much. Once that top surface is clean, the new stuff is going down. It's getting soaked. It's getting graded. It's getting packed, and we're going racing. First lesson in track prep for me to learn was that right there. Okay.
And that's what I'm getting at is that's exactly what the whole point is you learn as you go, and you learn from those promoters, and you learn from, the drivers, and we're learning right now about track prep. I don't care about track prep. Well, I kind of do now, so I can help.
But you got to remember, I spent 35 years around Claire Arnold. Claire Arnold wasn't just a racetrack owner. It wasn't just a racetrack promoter. He did the prep work. He knew what he did to his racetracks, and Claire arguably put together the best racetrack in the Western United States. His stuff was incredible. You pay attention to that stuff. You see what they're doing. I always watch that water truck, see where they're spraying, how they're doing it. That's part of the sport. I mean, every aspect about the sport I love. I've paid attention to this stuff since I was a little kid. Now that we're having to do it, you've got to remember what you've seen, and you've got to remember what you've talked about with certain people. I'll tell you right now, another great individual at a track surface, I don't care what anybody says, who can manipulate a surface just as good as Claire Arnold ever did, is Mike McCann. When he makes his calls on how to prep a track, he'll keep you on your toes. We've seen that track hooked up and locked down from top to bottom. We've seen it dry slick top to bottom. We've seen the bottom half dry slick and take rubber with the top half with a cushion 6 inches deep that you can be wide open around. He makes the calls, and his track prep guy does it. But I'm telling you, Mike, he's a tricky cat. You got to watch him. You never know what that track track's going to be like. He's good at what he's done. He's been in the game for 40-plus years.
Track will never be the same 2 weekends in a row.
So far, it hasn't.
Nope.
So far, it hasn't. And I'll tell you right now, I like that.
right?
I like that. It puts
Becomes-
everybody on their toes
Yeah.
and it makes you get up on the wheel.
It's a driver's
Okay.
track.